so welcome to Alopecia UK's All About Alopecia video series. Today we are going to be talking about dating and alopecia, which is a little bit nerve-wracking, I've got to be honest. So I think first, if we just go around and have a few introductions and say when we started with alopecia, whether you were single or in a relationship when you started with alopecia, and what's your relationship status now. I go first. So I was 11 when I started with alopecia. I've had it where it's come and gone. Had it all back by the time I was 16, had it for a few years, lost it again at about the age of 20-ish. So I was obviously single the first time, and when I was older, I think I was single at that point as well. My relationship status now is single. So who wants to go next? Ruth?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Ruth. I am a trustee of Alopecia UK. I first developed alopecia when I was 18 and had just left school. So I was luckily taking a year off to have a gap year, which was quite fortuitous because it meant I had a bit of time to kind of get used to my alopecia before I went to university. And I was single at the time when I developed alopecia. And I am now married. I got married 3 years ago to my husband Tim, and yeah, so we've been together for almost 5 years when we got married, and now we've been together for 8 years.
Naomi, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I developed alopecia universalis when I was 22, and I had that for a couple of years. I was single when it started. I then have had sort of various degrees of regrowth over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and I am now in a relationship.
How about you, Amy?
So hi, I'm Amy. My story is incredibly similar to Jen's in the sense that I first developed alopecia when I was 10 years old. So obviously dating was far from my mind at that point. In fact, I could get me as far away from boys as possible if you could. And I did develop some regrowth when I was sort of 15, 16 years old. And it fell out again when I was about 22. So at the time where it fell out the second time round, I was in a relationship at that time, but I am now single.
So that's a good introduction from everybody. So I think a good question just to start with is when you did have lost hair. So I guess for me and Amy, when we were younger, maybe weren't really thinking about the whole boys situation. But probably as we got older, whereas for Naomi and Ruth, obviously developing alopecia when you're a bit older, how did you feel about the whole dating side of things at that point when you were losing your hair?
Yeah, I think, well, for me, being 18, it was a really difficult time to lose my hair, although I was kind of glad in some ways that I hadn't lost it while I was still at school, because I felt like there perhaps would have been more like possibility of getting bullied or kind of feeling like, I don't know, kids can be cruel, can't they? So I sort of in some ways felt like it was a bit of a blessing that had happened when I was a bit older and was a bit more mature and was able to kind of understand what was going on. And, you know, I guess other people, like friends that I was speaking to about it, were a bit more understanding at a slightly older age. But I certainly was very nervous about opening up about it and really wanted to kind of conceal it and hide it from people, particularly from guys. And I wore wigs the majority of the time and really didn't, even male friends, I wouldn't open up to them and talk about it with them. So I was very kind of nervous at the prospect of dating with alopecia when I first developed it.
What about you?
I was going to say very similar like feelings to Ruth, really, in terms of just a lot of nervousness, I guess, about being sort of accepted. And I think, you know, losing your hair sort of in your early 20s when I mean, you're probably just kind of starting to come to terms with sort of like who you are. It felt like a bit of a like wrench in the other direction for me. And so to start with, I'd say for like a good, like the first year or so, dating didn't even really cross my mind. I'd sort of been single for a while anyway, and I was just sort of like, I was trying to deal with just the emotional side of what was happening to me anyway. And then it was almost like when it started to feel like a little bit normal, like having alopecia, it was suddenly then like, oh God, now I have to think about dating as well. And that was like the next level of trying to think about how you would even begin to explain that to someone. So yeah, I'd say like the overriding feeling just being that age and having alopecia and thinking about dating was just nerves, just how am I even going to do that?
Yeah, it just felt so insurmountable. Like it just felt this huge challenge that I just couldn't even get my head around how I could possibly do that. Whereas now that I'm much more comfortable with it, that obviously feels crazy that I felt so held back and so nervous about opening up. But at the time it felt massive. And yeah, I just couldn't even comprehend how I could talk about it with a guy.
Interesting. And what did you have any thoughts as a young teenager, Amy? I don't know, like I know for myself, like this was the one big thing, and I just thought I'll never have a boyfriend because I've got alopecia. That's what I used to think.
Yeah, I think I probably thought that as well. I think you know, it did having alopecia as a child and those the kind of bullying that did come with it, as Ruth sort of alluded to. I mean, that did happen, unfortunately, and kids can be quite cruel, and the fact that you are different from everyone, especially at school, you know, that's never really a good thing. It wasn't when I was at school anyway. So you did feel like an outsider, and you weren't really sure if any boys for me would ever consider dating me because of my alopecia, really. So yeah, definitely it was a really scary thing as a teenager going through that. Yeah, no, I think I'll end there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think the same for me, really. In that, so when I was younger, I just thought that's something that's just not going to happen for me. And then, I mean, for my teenage years, I just felt like I was waiting for my hair to come back, and it gradually came back. I think over a couple of years. In my head, there was no kind of, it didn't enter my head that it might be something that I'd have life. I was just waiting for it to come back, and it gradually was. And then I had most of it back for like the sixth form years. Had a great time. After sixth form, and I think I'd probably my first boyfriend when I was 18, I think, and I had all my hair then. That all ended, and then I lost all of my hair again after that, and then I was just like, oh, like that's gonna be it now then. And but it wasn't, and I've had several relationships over the years, and so I guess kind of, yeah, what's other people's experiences of actual the relationships, and how do you know, men react to you know, it's always been something that for me I know has been kind of this will never happen and all of this, and then it is always surprising how, you know, when you actually get down to it and then tell them like, oh yeah.
So I think just picking on what you were saying there, Jen, as well, like it's just kind of clicked with me, really. But I, you know, the only the first time I had male attention and had boyfriends was when I had hair. But I was sort of 16, 17, 18 at that time, and actually that's the time when you do get into this sort of relationships as well, isn't it? So I think maybe, you know, there's a part of me that thought when I was an adult and I lost my hair again, that, oh, you know, it's going to be exactly like it was when I was sort of 12, 13 with boys who don't really, you know, it's just, they just don't really understand. But I have to say it hasn't been like that at all for me as an adult. When I've been dating guys, I've spoken to them about my hair, and with the exception of one experience, which I have to say it was not that negative, I've had positive reactions from literally everyone I've spoken to, and if anything, it seems to make them kind of like me a little bit more, I think, sometimes, in the sense of, I think they're just, you know, they're wanting to hear a little bit about you, and then, you know, there's a part of you that they think actually you're managing this on a day-to-day and you're really confident who you are and all those sorts of things. That's some of the sort of feedback that I've had from guys I've dated before, which is really nice.
I was gonna say a similar thing in that I feel like the few relationships that I've sort of had since having alopecia, I've never really, when I've introduced it, which is always like a whole nother thing and it's really difficult, but when I have done that, I've never actually had a negative reaction to introducing it per se. And I know that can be like a massive fear for people with alopecia when they're kind of getting into that arena of like, well, how are they going to respond? And obviously you can't speak for everyone. You can't say that everyone is going to welcome it warmly, but I still think that for me, I think I realized over time that it wasn't so much about their reaction, but about how it was going to be over time in terms of like, if I got upset about it again, if it got worse, if it got better, like you say, almost like the day-to-day handling of having it is like the part of the relationship that you need them to feel like they support you in, not just the actual revealing of the alopecia itself, but kind of the emotional stuff that can then come with that sort of like along the way. And I think that's what you're doing, is you're putting a lot of trust in that person to be able to support you in that sense.
I totally agree with that, Naomi. I think you're right. Like, as someone with alopecia, that initial reveal feels huge, and that kind of, for us, probably feels like one of the defining moments of like, relationships and alopecia. But actually, I would agree, like, I've never had a negative reaction. People have always been positive, and I think if somebody did have a negative reaction, you probably wouldn't want to be with them anyway. So it's probably like sort of separates the wheat from the chaff in a way. But you're totally right that what's much more important is how someone supports you, because it is obviously, alopecia is a journey which we all go through, kind of peaks and troughs. Sometimes you feel comfortable with it and sometimes you have low days. So it's really important that whoever you're with is able to kind of support you through those tough moments, and that's really the most important thing, isn't it?
Definitely.
So it sounds like everyone's pretty much had fairly good reactions at this point. Why do you think it is such a big deal, the prospect of dating when you lose your hair? Why is it such a big deal?
I think it's you're putting yourself in quite a vulnerable position. You're like sort of exposing something about yourself that you may or may not, depending on how you choose to deal with your alopecia in the day to day, reveal to everyone. So if you are an avid wig wearer, it might be that no one else sees you without that wig, and so you're potentially revealing to this person who, early days and dating and stuff, you're kind of putting a lot of trust in this new person in your life to, like you say, take it on board and be supportive about it and stuff, which you might not even necessarily at that point give that to your friends and some of your family. So you're being quite open and vulnerable with someone when you're first telling them about it, I think is why it feels so like such a big deal.
Yeah, for me, it's I suppose because I am a wig wearer, I just don't want to feel like I'm deceiving them in any way, but also just not being true to myself. So to me, I think I put the pressure on myself to tell them as quickly as possible, just because I just think it would be in the back of my head constantly. But the other element of it that I find really tough in terms of the big reveal is because I have universalis, is removing my eyelashes. And I don't know why that is, but for me, like the loss of hair on my head is one thing, but because for me, removing your eyelashes just changes the way you look completely. I always really worry and get frightened about that. So like, I might, going to bed and stuff like that, I might put like black eyeliner on the lids, just to add some sort of definition on for a little while, because it worries me so much. And I think it's just because I feel like I look completely different than the person that they met me as. So it just worries me slightly for that reason.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think often though, what we kind of perceive as a big difference to other people is far less of a difference. And I mean, as an example, when I first told my husband Tim that I have alopecia, he hadn't even realised, and I kind of addressed it as like, oh, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, and he was like, oh well, I didn't even know I didn't even realize you were wearing a wig. And then similarly with my eyebrows, it took him like a few weeks to realize that my eyebrows were tattooed, even though he was obviously very close to my face. So I think people, and guys in particular, to make a sweeping generalization, are probably a lot less observant than we think they are.
True.
I had a very similar thing with the eyelashes, Amy, where I found it really hard, not even just to be around my boyfriend, but people in general for a really long time, because I felt like that was, like you said, the dead giveaway on my face with this. And I remember I was living with some friends for a few months. It was actually just recently during lockdown, and classic no makeup, like looking scruffy all the time because I'm not going anywhere. And one day I was like, oh, I've got really itchy eyes, and I think I've got something in it because I've got no eyelashes. And one of the girls was like, I've got no eyelashes. And I was like, yeah, like I've not worn makeup and lived with you for months. How have you never noticed? And she's like, no, I just didn't notice. And I was like, that blew my mind, because I was like, how could she not know?
Yeah, I do have that view of it's much bigger in our own minds than I think it is for everyone else a lot of the time, and that's something that we all have to work through, don't we, to get in the place where it feels safe to date. Because I was dating too early on, really, after my relationship broke down, and I was even though I ended relationships myself, and I wasn't even that keen on the person, I then spent months telling myself it was because I wasn't good enough for them, and and I was the problem and all that sort of stuff. And I had to really work on myself and accept myself with my alopecia, because it didn't help that my long-term relationship broke down fairly soon after, like in my second alopecia journey. And even though I don't think that influenced it at all, I think it was heading that way anyway. I think you can't help it. In your head you start thinking it's because of this, it's because of my alopecia, because I'm not as attractive as everyone else, he didn't fancy me anymore, and it plays on your mind. And so yeah, we have to work on ourselves, I think, sometimes before we can be that vulnerable to let someone in. And going back to exactly what you were saying right at the beginning of this, really, which I think was a really good point.
Interesting. It's something that stood out to me there, where you were all saying about eyes and eye makeup, and that it is. I just want to go back to that, because I think that is actually an area where I've always been really uncomfortable, generally, with people looking me in the eye. And people will say I've got terrible eye contact, and I have, and it's because I find it really uncomfortable to look people in the eye all the time anyway. But I spent ages always trying to divert people's eyes. Like, so, if someone's looking at you and you look down there, they'll often look that way as well, too. And that just made it more comfortable for me to break that kind of eye contact. But obviously, when it comes to men and dating, you need to be able to have that eye contact. But it's so incredibly uncomfortable to have them look, and you kind of just sitting there thinking, there's nothing kind of whatever about it. It's more a case of like, oh my God, are they looking at my eyelashes? Are they looking at my eyebrows? What are they thinking? All these things that go through our minds, and just it can make just the whole dating thing, I think, really stressful. Of the amount that we can be conscious of with the wigs and the makeup and the eye makeup and all of these things. Has anyone ever dated with no wig on? Or not?
I mean, I've been on dates with my husband without my wig on, but I don't know if I've been on like a first date without my wig on. I don't wear false eyelashes, so like I've been on lots of dates without eyelashes, and I do tend to wear eyeliner, but I don't know, I just find eyelashes such a faff that I find it too hard to wear them. But I don't know if people ever have really noticed that I don't have eyelashes. I think, again, it's that sort of people are less observant than you think they are.
I think that's true. And I think for me, I sort of in the early days of alopecia, or early 20s, let's say, when I was down in Liverpool at the time. I went to uni there, and I stayed down there for quite a lot of years. And at first, when I got there, like my wigs weren't very good. I wasn't very good at makeup, and gradually I got better. But I did notice a change in, like, earlier on. because I thought it was obvious, I would tell people quite quickly. So like a boyfriend that I had in my sort of early and mid-20s, I remember first meeting him, and I think I told him like maybe quite early on, because I just felt like it was obvious and I needed to. And then but I did notice I got better wigs, and like me and him split up, it was a nightmare. I got better wigs, I got better with makeup, and I think I felt like I could get away with people not knowing that I had alopecia, and that for me became a really tough point, because I kind of presented myself as this one thing, and yeah, I had a great time. I was in Liverpool, I was in my 20s, it was brilliant. But then it became really difficult to go to that next step with somebody and to be able to really reveal it, because I'm going to be honest, I felt like I would be a disappointment for them to find out, like they thought they were dating this one thing, and actually, and like you say, you take the wig off, yeah, that's one thing, but there's another layer when you take the eyebrows off, when you take the eyelashes off, and you do look very, very different to what they've what they thought that they were getting. And I really, really struggled with that for a long time.
And I think that the difficult thing to add on top of that is that most of us will have some kind of like hang up about dating anyway. Like it might be that you might think, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not funny enough, or I'm not, thin enough, or I'm not this or I'm not that. So if you already have something about yourself that you're kind of already scared about putting out there, if you add alopecia onto that, it's like this another layer of things that person kind of has to break through to, like you say, Jen, to be able to take it to the next level. They have to be really worth it to be able to like take it that far, because otherwise it feels like you're putting all of this and breaking through all of these boundaries for yourself for then potentially nothing.
So when do people bring it up in conversation? And I mean, for me, it's very different between now, the Alopecia UK years, when it's very hard to get away from it, whereas pre-Alopecia UK, my job was nothing to do with the word alopecia. There was nothing about me on the internet, and I could get away with not telling people until I was ready to. Like, when do you tell people? When did you all do that?
I was a rip the plaster off kind of person. Like, I was always do it really quickly, just because I just felt like and it's out in the open and it's done, and then I don't have to worry about it. So an early relationship, we'd sort of been going out on a couple of dates, and I sent him a text and told him about it. And then more recently, before I was in a relationship, when I was single, I put it on my Tinder profile, and I just put it out there because I was just like, then it's straight away, if you are contacting me, you already know this, and it's out there. And for some people it was all almost then like a bit of an icebreaker. Like they would get in touch and be like, oh wow, like how do you deal with that, or your wigs look great, or this, that and the other. Like, again, I never really got any negative stuff from that, but I was also quite conscious of it being like, oh, so that's not the only interesting thing about me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want that to be my defining thing, but it is just a thing that I want you to know. So it's a hard balance, I think.
So I have sorry.
No, go on, you go.
So I have the 2-date rule. So second date that I will tell people, particularly if they are people that I've met online or anything like that anyway. And that's just because, first date, they don't know anything about you at all. And sort of like Naomi said, as much as there's an element that I do believe my alopecia has a huge part of my life, and it made a huge part of who I am. So there is a level of that it does define me at a certain extent, but it is not the only thing about me. And so I don't want to say it in the first date. I'd rather them get to know me as a person and then decide whether or not, they're attracted to me or they like me. But as I mentioned earlier, I don't like keeping it hanging over me as something that I haven't told them about yet. So I do tell them on the second date. And I have to say, it can get really awkward, because I'm desperately trying to find a way to mention it, and like trying to break some sort of easy segue into a conversation about alopecia. It's not easy. The worst one. I couldn't tell you the worst one, as in it was the funniest, but because I was telling, we were walking through a London station, And I basically told him I had something to tell him, just to get it out of the way. And I kept saying things like, so if it's a problem, it's not a big deal. I just need to talk to you about it. And I swiped my Oyster card through the barrier, and he swiped his, and he was out of money, so he had to go and top up his card. So there was like about 2 minutes between me going, I need to tell you something, and it's, if it's a big deal, you need to let me know. So in his head he was like, what was she about to tell me? So it was actually quite great, because when I told him what it was, he was like, oh, is that all it is? Fucking hell.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
See, I've never been brave enough to say it to somebody's face when, like, obviously I've had conversations with them after they've known, but I've never said it to someone's face, like when we've been dating. Like, I think that I think that would be a step too far for me. I'd be like really scared and be like, oh, I don't know what do I say.
Do you not also think that like messaging someone, I don't know, then I feel like I would be so nervous about their response that I'd be, when you're sitting waiting for a message, I don't know, I feel like I'd be too nervous. I'd rather do it in person, like,
yeah,
then at least you'd be able to see their reaction. But I guess you're different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
In my experience, I've I think second date rule, I like that idea. Like with my husband, I met him at a party, and then on our first date I did tell him, but he was totally oblivious, so it wasn't as big a deal as I thought it was going to be. But yeah, I've always said it in person.
It is interesting that relationships it isn't a big deal. They're not actually that bothered, a lot of men. But I mean, I think that's, you've got to kind of, I was always got to kind of suss them, and then if someone you think they're going to be an idiot, like I would never have told them. But the ones that then are all right, and then they're not that bothered, really. And you do get used to it and do get comfortable. I just think the difficult bit is finding the actual one you can get your claws into, and but yeah, I need to just keep hold of them. God, I'm terrible at staying in relationships. Probably a different story, but yeah, I mean, so what has been the reactions then, I guess, when you've told it?
For me, I've had literally from literally that's the end of the conversation, because they're just so oblivious and it doesn't mean anything to them, to not knowing what it is, to then asking lots of questions. It's literally, it normally just goes from there, really. And then the normally is the middle ground, really. So that someone, I very often get them say, oh, I've heard of that. So I know someone who's already got it. There's, as we all know, when you talk to anyone with about your alopecia, people normally know someone, even if it's a friend of a friend of a friend, they will know someone with it, which is amazing. Because when I was a kid, no one knew what alopecia was. So it's changed so much since then. And so I love that reaction, that kind of, oh, I've heard of that. And then it's normally like, just some questions like, how long have you had it, and how do you feel about it, and all that sort of stuff. So I normally get some really, really good reactions. So yeah, I think it's nice. It's an important part of my life, so you want them to kind of be interested in it as well.
What about the actual revealing of the alopecia once you are in a relationship with someone? It's like revealing like an extra layer of nakedness, isn't it? Like, don't you think?
I think it really is. Like, it's a very like vulnerable position to be feeling like you're putting yourself in, because it's a bit like we were sort of saying earlier with the makeup and stuff. I feel like it was all on me, like, because in the relationship that I'm in now, I kept my wig and my eyelashes and my makeup on for first few months when we were dating, when I was around him. Even when I was like sleeping over, I would sleep in them, and I wouldn't do that anywhere else. So I was sort of like, I was almost like a bit cross at myself for feeling like I had to do that when he didn't make me feel like that. It was all just like in my head that if I didn't, it was just like, well, if we had to wait a little bit more, he'll be too far in and then he can't say anything. So it was sort of like, I was just sort of, but it was silly because I knew that he wasn't really going to care. And then it sort of like broke down from there, where it's like I started taking like the eyelashes off, and then I started taking the wig off, and maybe I do one and not the other, and sometimes, and I just like
bit at a time.
Just really, have one eyelash on, one eyelash off. Like, it was just silly, really. Like, when I look back now, it seems so ridiculous. Because now I'm like the complete opposite. It's like if he sees me looking made up, it's like, whoa, what's happened? Where are you going? So it's funny how it like can quickly change, but that those first few things, like I remember the first time I was going around his house without my wig on, and I'd taken it off and I put a headscarf on because I was like, I'm not quite ready for the total transition. And I got like, I was driving to his house and I was just like, I felt so nervous. I felt like I was going to vomit. And like, I got to his house, and you know when someone sort of like, you know, if you've got like a spot here or something and people are like, and just keep like looking straight at it, and he kept sort of doing that, and I was like, oh, what, does it look really stupid? And he was like, no, I really like it, it looks nice. Like, and then that was just it, and then that was sort of like the end of the conversation, and I was just sort of like, oh, okay, that's done now. Like, it was felt like an anticlimax. Like, I felt like something horrible was going to happen, and it just didn't.
And I think that's definitely been my experience as well. It's been like underwhelming in terms of reactions. But yeah, I think like in terms of what Tim thinks, he just wants me to be comfortable. And I think, his reaction when I first told him actually I was wearing a wig was, why don't you take it off? You must be hot. So I think he just like ultimately wants me to be as comfortable as I can be. And whenever I, like even now, sometimes I sort of feel I need to wear a wig for like work Zoom calls, or if we're going out somewhere, and I'll kind of like say it's itchy or something, and he'll be like, well, if it's itchy, just take it off. Like he just doesn't understand the concept of feeling like you have to put on a wig or a covering when you don't want to, or when that's not like what would make you feel the best. But I think, so again, it just comes back to like a lot of it, I think, is in my head rather than in anyone else's head. I think it's like about the way we see ourselves rather than the way other people see us. And as Amy said, I think you just need to like work on yourself as much as you possibly can to get over that.
Which is good advice. I think I need to take that advice, Amy. I'll hold my hands up and say I'm probably like the worst person when it comes to alopecia and dating, maybe.
I gave myself a year, Jen. I said, right, I'm having a boy band for a year, and it was generally the best thing I could do, because it just meant that I got confident and comfortable in my own skin. So when I was just more resilient when I went back out again. So when things didn't work out, I was just in a better place to not just instantly blame, oh, it's because of the way I look that went wrong. You know, it was a much better thing. And that was when I got involved with the charity as well. So, you know, that obviously helped a lot as well. So for me, with the grand reveal, I mean, I've started using my Instagram page as kind of like a tester. So like on dates, I'll be like, oh, just look at my Instagram's feed, and like, this is my tattoo, like just seeing how it responds. So it's kind of like just an extra layer of just a slight reveal because it's a picture, and then, you know, the real reveal feels a bit safer because they've already at least seen a version of it somewhere.
See, nowadays,
have you ever had a question about your tattoo? Like, has someone ever asked, have you got any tattoos? And then you've had to be like, oh, I actually have one on my head.
Yeah, I have done that. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to put that conversation on the table without just going, so I've got something to tell you, which sounds really serious and enormous. So there has been certain situations where it has come up organically. So sometimes the tattoo conversation is one of them. The other one might be like, what was I up to that weekend? And I was running a support group, for example, for Alopecia UK. So it would just come up really naturally like that, which I actually preferred, because it just felt more, you know, something you could talk about. And sometimes that would happen on the first date, so it wasn't always, you know, I wasn't strict with it couldn't come up on the first date if it came up naturally. So yeah, it's good. There are things that kind of you can talk about that then gives you a sort of an open door to start talking about your alopecia as well.
Yeah, it's hard to find that segue. I guess you're always hoping they're going to like compliment your hair, and then you can be like, oh, well, that's
the
wig. I think the digital stuff, I guess it can and it can't help now. So like, I'm just thinking of the reveals when I was younger, when, you know, you couldn't look things up about me. So that like I'm just thinking of the reveals. I mean, there's a couple where I didn't. I was similar to you, Naomi, with one where I kept going to bed with wigs on, and I was just eventually like, I just can't, I'm not getting any sleep. I can't do this. And then he was like, well, don't wear it then. But I think I still wore bandanas. But it was the long-term relationship in my 20s, and I think he was just eventually, he was like, you're going to show me then? And I think I just went like this, covered my face, and he took my wig off, and I just was like, oh, I just couldn't look at him. I hate it. It's not as bad now, I'm older and stuff, but now I find a difficulty, and I don't know if you get this or not, Amy, because you're quite, there's out there with alopecia, but I find that people can Google you and find things, and so people have often, and so I find that difficult because people can find out I've got alopecia before I'm maybe ready to tell them.
Yeah, that's happened to me before. People have known.
Yeah, and then
your Instagram page is linked with your number.
The what? Sorry.
Your Instagram page is linked with your phone number. So if they've added you as a contact and they're just scrolling through Instagram, you know, it says you might know these people because they're in your contacts. It comes up. I only learned about that through a guy. I was like, oh god.
Didn't know that.
No privacy.
So I find that a little bit difficult nowadays, in that people can, you know, I want to tell them when I'm ready, but I also would rather tell them myself than they find it out elsewhere. And so sometimes I find that I'm having to mention it before I maybe usually would, before you even know if you like them or have even been on a date or whatever. I find that quite tricky now with the whole, so for those of everyone doing media, or just think if, you know, you do want it all on the internet. But it is a good thing to do, and you know, for actually last few years, you know, been on a couple of dates and stuff. This year, told one, and he was actually quite impressed with everything he found. He's like, oh, what you're doing is brilliant and things like that. So, but yeah, still.
As he should be. It is amazing.
But yeah, I'm not sure about the dating. This is why I was nervous about doing more dating stuff. I was already dating stuff about me and alopecia on the internet. I'm like,
I know, I was going to talk about your TV experience, Jen.
It was. I don't ever regret it. Actually, it was a really good experience, and to go through, and it was quite an eye opener. Actually, I think I had some, you know, key epiphany type moments on that journey, which was interesting, and now I can't remember them. but no, it was good thing. Like they pushed me to do things that I maybe wouldn't have otherwise done, like taking my wig off on a date was something that would never have happened. And I think at the start of that TV show, they were like, would you ever take your wig off on a date? And I was like, absolutely not, no way. And then as we went along, and they were like, do you think you would do this? And I was just thinking, oh god, and I did, and it was fine. So that, yeah. But anyway, forget about all that. But so what else was I going to ask? I've got a few more things. What have we not covered with dating, do you think? Have we covered it all?
I was going to talk about like my experience of having alopecia at my wedding, if that's relevant.
Yeah, definitely. Go on.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like getting your hair done for your wedding is such a big thing, and having alopecia, that was quite nerve-wracking because, you know, you want your hair to look great, but obviously it's difficult to have like particular styles when you're wearing a wig. So, you know, I had to have a kind of like half up, half down style that kind of looked right with a wig, and that kind of concealed the bits you want to conceal. But in the end, it was fine, and like I liked the way my hair looked. But actually, the reality was that when we got our photos taken, I decided that I wanted to have some without my wig on, and actually those photos are my favourite ones from the whole day. And I think they look the most natural and the best because I like felt myself in the photos and or at that moment. And yeah, I just think they're lovely, and like I don't know, I think they're more powerful than the other ones as well because they kind of like show, you know, my true self. And yeah, I was really glad that we did that and that we got some photos without my wig on. I don't know if I ever would have managed to, I'm sure some people do, but like to go the whole day without my wig. But it was just really nice to have that moment where I took my wig off for the photos.
And sometimes that's quite nice because it's quite a private thing. I think what's landed with me there is I think things that some of you touched on before about it, like being able to be with somebody where you can kind of fully trust, and almost like that is almost a representation of you know, they're the pictures that it's that extra layer, that extra private bit of yourself, that extra vulnerable bit of yourself that you've found somebody to share that with who you're 100% comfortable with. And I think that is really lovely when that is and can be the case, and so to have that in picture form, I imagine they are lovely pictures to have, because they represent that whole thing, isn't it? I think that's probably what we're all striving for, me and Amy as well, to find that person that we can kind of, you know, you can just fully relax and trust and just be yourself with, whatever way, shape or form that is, I guess, in all forms. Because I think sometimes, there is an element sometimes of feeling your true self. Like, I think for me there is this sometimes this thing around identity. You know, I do see myself, like, I've always worn my wigs ever since I was young, so I've got this relationship with my wigs, and I feel like me with my wig on, but I also feel like me with my wig off, and you need to be able to be both of those if that's what you're comfortable with, don't you, with whoever you're with. So it's interesting.
I think just pulling back to like a slightly older point, but it just popped into my head, is sort of something that Amy touched upon earlier, which was about when you're sort of first starting with alopecia and thinking about like the future, and like, you know, is anyone going to find me attractive again? Is anyone going to like want to date me and stuff like that? And all those fears that I think for a lot of people, when they're either, if they're single when it starts, or if they kind of become single at some point and they still have it, is that, like, I remember very much having that thing of like, well, I'm not going to get married now, I'm not going to be in relationships. Like, it was just, it was almost like in my head that I was just resigned to that, like that was just like a fact. And yet actually meeting other people and speaking with other people, I kind of quickly realized actually that's like probably highly unlikely, because actually quite a lot of people are in very like loving and happy relationships, and their alopecia is just one tiny little segment of not just their relationship but them as a person as well, and they've got so much more about them and to offer and things. And I think hearing that and kind of realizing that through other people as well was a really helpful thing for me to kind of, I think like someone said earlier as well, like love yourself first and just sort of be like, actually I've got so much to actually offer this person that actually if they don't want me because I'm not growing some hair on my head, that it's probably not really worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
I totally agree. It's that RuPaul thing of, you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else?
Love it.
So I guess then maybe to finish but if you were to give any advice to people out there on the dating scene right now, what would it be? You've kind of all given some really good ones there, so you can reuse those if you want, and just as you're finishing off, kind of, this is what the message I'll leave you with.
I think for me it would be, do things when you're ready. Like, don't feel rushed into doing anything. Like, it took me almost 10 years to kind of go public with my alopecia. So yeah, do it when you feel comfortable, but also try and remember that your self-perception is very different to the way that other people perceive you, and other people are generally a lot kinder in their perception of you than you are to yourself. So like, try and like think about what you think of your friends and how great they look and how like wonderful they are despite any of their perceived flaws, and then try and like feel that about yourself, because, or like try and think about how your best friend might think about you. I'm sure they would say you're gorgeous and amazing and brave and all the rest of it, and try and like take some of those qualities in on yourself.
Good. Anyone else?
So yeah, I echo that completely, and I think, you know, I've said it a lot in this call, but it's something I really do stand by, which is, you know, you need to have that sort of self-assurance and confidence in yourself, and know your worth. I would say, you know, before, because it can be damaging sometimes to do that a bit too early on, really. But I think, you know, the only thing I would say is that if you ever experience that someone has an issue with you having alopecia, that is more a slight on them than it is on you. Like that, it's just, you just can't expect anyone to, you wouldn't want that person in your life anyway. Even if you had hair and you heard that that's how they treated other people, you wouldn't want that person in your life. So don't listen to that and think that's how everyone's going to feel, because I can tell you now, they won't. The majority of people out there do not feel like that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think what I'd say as well, and I think it kind of a little bit echoes what Amy was just saying about sort of, getting yourself into that position of feeling comfortable first. Like, don't feel like you have to, go into dating, the minute that you find out. Give yourself some time to sort of like reflect and be where you are, because I think once you've done that, you can then also just look at all the other positives about yourself instead and say, like, well, I might have hair loss, but I also am really great at X, Y, and Z, and I'm really funny, and I'm all of these other great things. So it's like, you've got so much more to offer than that one thing. That try not to focus on that, because everyone has something that they might not like about themselves.
Feeling a lot of pressure now.
Yeah. I've got a really good one, Jen.
Oh God, what am I going to say? I think for me, the thing that's rattling around in my head, so I'll just say that, is just, it's surprising how not bothered men in my case, but anybody looking for any partner, it's surprising how not bothered people can be, and how accepting people can be. So but I guess you've got to give them a chance, and that's maybe something I'm a little bit bad for, not giving people a chance. And my final advice would be some advice that my friend gave me at the weekend. And I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to get a relationship. And she was like, well, you're not exactly trying, are you, Jen? So I think you've got to try to put yourself out there, really. So that's going to be my words of wisdom at the end of this video. You've got to give people a chance, and you've got to actually, put yourself out there. So that is where I'll finish with my advice. But so I think what we'll do is we'll finish there. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking part. It's been really interesting to listen to you all and all your dating experiences. Hopefully this has been helpful to some other people out there who might be, either starting out with dating or starting out with alopecia and thinking, oh my God, how am I going to even date ever? Hopefully this has been helpful in some way. Hopefully everyone is enjoying the 15 for 15 Alopecia UK birthday bonanza month. And yeah, we'll leave it there. Happy birthday, Alopecia UK, once more. And thank you very much.